Hello Potters, I'm Stacey McDonald and I have Stacey McDonald Pottery Studio in Freeport, Illinois. Come down and see me sometime. This video is going to be yet another view of my beginner wheel throwing, how to throw a bowl. This will be my third video and just from a different angle. So hopefully if you watch all three you'll get all the information, and I'll try my best to keep my hands out of the way for this one. So what you're going to need for this exercise is your 6 basic pottery tools. So you want your needle tool, your throwing knife, your wooden D-rib, your flexible metal rib, your sponge, wire tool, and let's think positive. We'll have a wear board and a piece of newspaper waiting to accept our finished pot. I have a bucket of some water in front of me here. I am starting with a well-kneaded ball of soft clay, about 1.5 pounds. And I'm going to put that in the center of my wheel and hit it twice to get it to stick. I'm going to turn my wheel on. Now the first thing I want to do is make sure that the ball of clay is well stuck to the wheel. So I'm going to take my sponge, put a little bit of water on top of it, and I'm going to push down, and then with my fingers I'm going to smear the clay down to the wheel head. So this looks like I'm only pushing down, but what I'm doing with my fingers down here is I'm smearing the clay down to the wheel. And what you'll see from the side is that it is completely connected to the wheel. There's no gaps or spaces underneath it, so water can't get under, and it's not going to go anywhere. I can push on it now and it's not going to come flying off the wheel. So now my next step is to start pushing all of the clay into the center of the wheel. And how I'm going to do that is I'm going to use the pressure from my left arm. I'm going to have that come down my arm into the base of my palm of my hand. And I'm going to push down my arm and into the center of the ball of clay. I'm going to push across the clay. Think about if this were a clock, I'm pushing from 8 o'clock to 2 o'clock. So when I have my hands on the clay, it looks like I'm pushing this way, but I'm not. I am pushing this way. And then my right hand is, I'm going to use the flat parts of my fingers, and I'm going to pull the clay towards the palm of my left hand. So I'm doing this. When I have my hands on the clay, it looks like I'm doing this, but you've got no pressure, you've got no, most people don't have the strength this way to move the clay into the middle of the wheel. With my arm braced on my leg or my splash pan, I can really lean in this way, and then I pull that clay towards the palm of this hand, and I have a lot more strength and a lot more control. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to make sure that the clay is always shiny. If it's not shiny, it's not wet enough. And I can usually do that just by dipping my hands in the bucket of water. So I'm going to push on the clay with my left hand, and I'm going to pull with my right. Now both of my hands are resting on the wheel now. As I put the pressure on the clay, you'll see that it's coming up in between my hands, and then I'm going to bring my hands slowly upwards, and that turns the clay into a cone. Now I'm going to keep it wet. I'm going to use my left hand and I'm going to rest it against the clay. I want to make sure that my hands are never tucking under the ball of clay. I want to have the ball of clay either have a sloped sides or sides that go straight up and down. So I'm resting on the wheel, supporting that ball of clay. I'm going to use the pressure in the base of my palm, and I'm going to push that cone over into my left hand. And my thumb just rests on top of it to make sure that I don't end up getting a little dish in there. So I'm going to push, and that requires very little strength to get that clay moving back down, and you see it turns into a ball again. And I'm going to do that coning up and coning down until my clay is centered. And I don't know if you can see what my hands are doing in relationship to one another, but this is a great way of a great view to see how my hands are working together. So I'm pushing with my left, pulling with my right, and these fingers over here are helping that pull in. I move my hands up the clay, and then my right fingers are coming out on top of my left fingers, and I'm going to push that clay back down into the left hand. So this hand position may not work for everybody, but that is something that we can discuss in your next class. There are other ways to center. This isn't the only one. So what I mean by centered is when you touch the clay and your fingers remain quiet all the way down the ball of clay. You don't have this wiggling going on. So sometimes it's hard to tell by looking, but if you close your eyes and touch the clay, you will easily be able to tell if your fingers are wiggling back and forth. As I get down here at the bottom, I can feel like when I have my eyes closed, I can feel that my fingers are moving back and forth a little bit. So I'm going to cone up and down one more time. And when I was coming up, I was really paying attention to bringing that bottom in with my fingers. So I push with my left hand, and my right hand goes over top of those fingers. Actually, no, other way around. And with my right hand, I'm taking my fingers at the wheel head and pulling that bottom in. And that's bringing that very base of the ball of clay into the centering process. So let's see, now I'm quiet all over. So once my clay is centered, I need to get ready to start making my bowl. Keeping it nice and wet. I'm going to support the ball of clay with my left hand. The bottom of my left hand is resting against the wheel head, and I'm leaning up against the ball of clay. I'm making sure, especially these fingers, making sure that I'm not tucking under the ball of clay. I don't want to make a mushroom. So I'm supporting the ball of clay, and then I'm going to take the base of my right hand, and I'm going to karate chop the clay. Now my knuckles should be in line with the very center of the ball of clay. So I'm going to push the ball of clay down. Now if I find that I'm making a dish in the ball of clay, I want to pivot my fingers upwards. I want this ball of clay to be somewhat domed. And everybody's hands are shaped a little bit differently, so you may have to adjust how your hand position is on the clay. I want to center the clay down until it is 1 inch to 1.5 inches thick on the wheel head. And that ensures that the base of my bowl is going to be wide enough so that when I make it, it's not going to be too tippy. And also it makes sure that it leaves enough clay in the ball so that I can bring up some nice walls into my bowl. So that's my first step in making my bowl. Yay! So the next step is going to be opening up and creating the bottom of the bowl. So how I do that is I take my right hand and I put it on top of the ball of clay and I just relax it. And then I'm going to put the pad of my middle finger right over top of the center of clay. So that finger's riding right in the center. And in my left hand, I'm going to hold my sponge with just a little bit of water in it. I want to take my first 2 fingers of my left hand and I'm going to push on the middle finger of my right hand. And I want to make sure that I'm putting pressure along the finger. I don't want to just push on the tip. I want to push the top half of the finger, past that knuckle. So I'm going to push on that finger and create a hole in my clay, giving a little bit of water as I need it. And this finger position does 2 things for me. First of all, it gives me a nice tapered hole, And second, it doesn't put a lot of wear and tear on any of my joints. If I were to start bending my finger like this, or I use my thumbs to go in and make a hole, I feel like that's putting a lot of pressure on specific joints. And since I want to do this for a long time, I want to take good care of my body. So there's lots of different ways of opening up. I feel like this one is the lowest impact on my body. Excuse me. So I'm going to push down until I feel like I'm about 1/4 of an inch away from the wheel, and that's setting the thickness of the bottom of my bowl. So I'm going to turn off the wheel and take my needle tool. I'm going to put my tool in the center of my hole. I'm going to run my index finger down the tool until it touches clay, and then pull them both out, and that's going to give me the thickness of what the bottom is. So you can see I can go a little bit deeper if I wanted to bring it down to about 1/4 of an inch. It's best to stop before you go too far. So if you're having trouble figuring out how deep to go, stop a little bit before you think you might be there. It's easier to fill it, to go down and open it up a little bit more than it is to fill it in. If we fill this in after we've gone too deep and we try to put some clay in there, we're almost always going to have our pot fail by cracking, because the consistency of the clay that you're filling the hole with is going to be different than the consistency of the clay that the pot is being thrown with. That's going to set up drying differences, and whenever you have one part of the pot drying differently than another part of the pot, that causes cracks. So if you go down a little bit too far, go with it. Go all the way down to the wheel head, put a hole in the bottom, now you have a flower pot. And when you draw out, just come up a little bit and continue to come out. So or cut it off the wheel and start with a new ball. It's better than trying to fix something that has gone wrong. So now I'm going to go down a little bit deeper. I'm going to put my finger back in there, squeeze a bit of water, press down just a little bit further. And we're fortunate enough to have an air bubble, and I don't know if you're going to be able to see that with the lights on the camera. So first of all, I'm going to check my thickness, and my thickness is now good. And now I have an air bubble that when you find an air bubble in your clay at this stage, it's okay to just go ahead and poke it with your needle tool. Just break that air bubble open. So I'm going to go ahead and just press that down, get the air out of that bubble and smooth that hole. So now I've set the depth of the thickness of the bottom of my pot. I've got the hole as deep as I want it to go. Now I need to make a curve in the bottom of my bowl. And I'm just going to pantomime that. I'm going to put my fingers back where I was before. Give a little bit of water, and then I want to come out and up. I'm going to make a curve in the bottom of the pot. You should only do this once. You want to do it assertively. You want to do a nice smooth movement so that the bottom of your bowl is smooth. And one more thing to consider is your rim. You want the rim of that bowl to come out and stop right above where the clay meets the wheel down here. And that's something that you're not going to be able to see. Once I start pulling clay out, I'm going to have a belly coming out, and if I wait until I see it, I'm going to have my pot all the way out here. And then we're making a plate, and this video is not about making plates. This video is about making a bowl, so we're going to stop the rim right here, right above where the clay connects to the wheel. A little more water. I'm going to put my finger back in there, give a little bit of water, and I'm going to support the finger, and now I'm going to pull straight towards me, out and up in a nice smooth motion, and you should be able to see the line of that rim. It's right there, and the clay connects to the wheel right down here. And you can see that I've got this belly going on here. So once I've made the bottom of my bowl, I'm going to go in with my finger and just define it, smooth it out. So the next step is to get this clay moving upwards into the wall of our pot. There's lots of different ways of doing this. One of the best ways that I have ever seen is called the push-pull, and I learned it from Lynn Fisher at Rock Valley College in Rockford, Illinois. And it's the easiest way for beginners to start moving that clay upwards. So the push-pull, you're going to start with holding the sponge in between your outstretched index fingers. So you want just a little bit of sponge sticking out past your finger, and you have to straighten your fingers out and get the rest of your fingers out of the way. Connect your thumbs together so you have this configuration of your fingers, and you want to brace yourself well on your splash pan or on your legs. You're going to jam your fingers down at where the clay meets the wheel head, and then pivot your fingers upwards. And I don't know if you can see as I pantomime here that as I come upwards, my fingertips get closer to the center of the wheel. And that's going to bring my clay up into a volcano. What's important is that you only do this once and that you do not move your hands. The only movement is a pivot upwards. If you come in and start pushing this way, you are going to lose the efficiency of this move, and you'll end up with a very tight top to your volcano, and your next step is going to be so much harder. So I'm braced. I'm going to jam my fingers down to where the clay meets the wheel, and then I'm slowly going to pivot my fingers upwards. I want to go very slowly because I'm asking a lot of clay to move upwards. If you end up with big grooves in your clay, you're going too fast. Now as I come upwards, I may see my rim start to get wobbly or wrinkly. I'm not going to worry about that. I'm just going to keep going. I'm going to slowly come up and off the top. And there's my volcano. So once I've got the clay moving upwards, I want to do something about this rim. The rim is what everybody sees on any functional pot. That's the first thing you see, and it's going to tell a lot about how functional the pot is, how well thrown, how well finished it was, what the intent of the potter was for the use of the item. So you really want to attend to your rim every time you make a pull upwards. We're going to take and smooth that rim out. And how you do that is you want to straddle the pot with the first two fingers of your left hand and squeeze a little bit of water down your fingers. And that's going to wet the inside and the outside of the pot. Now I'm going to squeeze the wall of the pot with my fingers. I'm going to support that wall, not let anything push it over. Then I'm going to take my sponge and wrap it around my thumb. I have my first two fingers of my right hand on top of my thumb underneath, and you can see that creates a trough here. I'm going to take that trough and I'm going to put it on top of the rim. And notice my hand is leaning up against my left hand. So I'm supporting the rim so that when I push down on it, I'm not going to cause damage. And I'm going to rotate my sponge around and just smooth that rim out. Get the water out of the center, and now I'm ready to do my pull. So for the pull, I'm going to take my right index finger and put a groove under here in the very bottom where the clay meets the wheel. And that gives me a space to put my finger and start pulling that clay upwards. Then I'm going to straddle the pot and make both the walls wet again. On the inside, I want to hold that wall from becoming smaller. So I'm going to hold my ground inside, and I usually use the middle finger of my left hand, but it doesn't matter, whatever's comfortable for you. I'm going to hold that wall in place, and then on the outside, I'm going to cover my finger with the sponge, push in to the pot from the outside. I'm pushing out from the inside. I'm going to set my pressure and position, and then pull my hands straight up. Do not move your fingers in relationship to one another. I'm going to release my pressure as I come up to the rim and slowly let go. I'm going to get the water out of the center, compress my rim, and now I'm going to do one more pull to get to full height. I'm going to wet my walls, make my groove down here, support the wall on the inside. I'm going to set my pressure in position and come straight up. Make sure that when you touch the clay you have at least one arm braced and your hands are connected together. I'm going to release my pressure as I get up to the rim. Get the water out of the center and compress my rim. So now you're saying to yourself, gosh, I thought we were making a bowl and that looks an awful lot like a coffee mug. And you're right. But what I'm going to do next is I'm going to stretch the wall outwards and make it into a bowl. When I do that, my rim is going to get a lot thinner. So if I find that my rim has become thin because I forgot to release my pressure as I was coming up to the rim and I've got a really skinny little rim, I can thicken it up. Let me show you how to do that. I'm going to moisten the walls. I'm going to hold onto the wall with the first two fingers of my left hand, and I'm going to make an H. And with my index finger, I'm going to push down on that rim, and you can see it get thicker. Once it's as thick as I want it to be, I'm going to use my sponge to just smooth it off. Always support the rim. Whenever you're pressing on it, you want to make sure that you're supporting it with your other hand. So now I'm about to do my shaping pull. I'm going to wet the walls. I'm going to put my hands back where they were for my regular pulls, but now instead of coming straight upwards, I'm going to come out towards my right ear. See how that's stretching my pot out to become a bowl. And also notice how thin the rim becomes. I'm going to compress my rim, get the water out of the center. So there's nothing wrong with that. That's a decent bowl, but I'm going to play with it a little bit. Using my D-rib, I'm going to make sure it's wet and clean. I'm going to put the rib up against my pot, and I want a very steep angle. I want it to go along my pot like this. I don't want to scrape my pot. I want to compress my pot. And then on the inside, I'm going to press the pot out against the rib. So I'm squeezing the pot between my finger and the rib, and I'm going to come up this way. So that's hard for you to see from this angle. And I'm just bringing my fingers up along the rib. And that's going to straighten out my walls a little bit. I'll stretch my rim just a little bit more. And then I have a very angled bowl right now. I'm going to go in with my hands, with my fingers, two fingers on the outside, 2 fingers on the inside, and I'm just going to give myself a little bit of a belly. That way it'll hold more ice cream. I'll give the rim a little bit of a flare. If you want to, you can experiment with your flexible metal rib. Be careful with this guy. If it gets caught in the clay, it comes around, it will cut you. It's called the rib of death for that reason, or rib of doom. So you want to bend the rib, put it up against your pot, and then push the pot out against the rib. And if you're really feeling adventurous, you can use the curved edge of the rib on the inside of your bowl to scrape away the slurry and refine your shape a little bit. My hands are probably just in the way for you to see what I'm doing. But what I did was hold the rib at a very steep angle to the inside of the pot, and I just went down and refined that edge. Go back over it with my fingers to give it that human touch. I always want to compress the bottom of my bowl to make sure that the grog is pushed down below the surface. And make sure that my rim is where I want it to be. And now this is the angle where you're not going to be able to see me wet trim at all. So I'm just going to go ahead and wet trim. And you'll have to watch another video to see that from the side. As a beginner, it's important to not go any faster with the wheel than you feel comfortable with. So just because you saw me going fairly quickly, there are a few things where you can't slow the wheel down. Be comfortable, feel in control, and speed it up when you feel more comfortable with the clay. So now I've done my wet trim. Now I want to cut the bowl off of the wheel using my wire tool. I want to wrap the tool around my fingers until I'm fairly close to the pot and hold it tight. I want to hold the wire down to the wheel with both my thumbs and go under the pot. Then the easiest way to take the pot off of the wheel is to use your fingers. You're going to spread out your first two fingers on both hands and lay them down on the wheel. And slide your fingers towards the pot until all four fingers touch, and then pick up one side first, and there's your pot. And bring it over to your wear board. So then once you've got your pot on the wear board, you can wrap it in plastic and it'll set up next week for trimming. I'm going to take this guy and cut it in half so you kind of see what we're trying to achieve with our throwing. Now let's go down like this. Okay, so what we're trying to achieve is a nice even wall thickness, and it's kind of distorted here, but you want to leave a little bit of clay down here that's going to support this wall. We'll trim that away next week when we're doing our trimming, and then we can smooth off the bottom and we'll have a nice bowl. Thanks for watching.